A new report claims the alleged ransom note sent in connection to Nancy Guthrie says that she is safe, but she is scared.
Whoever is out there holding our mother, we want to hear from you. We haven't heard anything directly.
Nancy Guthrie's son is trying to speak directly to his mom's kidnapper in a video that was posted to Instagram overnight, where the search for Nancy seems to be centered as the FBI is offering thousands of dollars now as a reward. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Well, it is now day 6 in the search for Nancy Guthrie, and one of the 2 deadlines listed in an alleged ransom note is passed.
This is Cameron Guthrie. I'm speaking for the Guthrie family. Whoever is out there holding our mother, we want to hear from you. We haven't heard anything directly. We need you to reach out, and we need a way to communicate with you so we can move forward. But first, we have to know that you have our mom. We want to talk to you, and we are waiting for contact.
That's the video posted right around the time that the FBI says a deadline was listed in the alleged ransom note that authorities and the Guthrie family seem to be taking very seriously. Now, that deadline was 5 p.m. Mountain Time on Thursday. The FBI also said that there is a second deadline listed in the note, claiming it was around sometime this upcoming Monday, but they didn't go into further details on that during a news conference Thursday at the Pima County Sheriff's Department. They did, though, unveil some key information that was included in the alleged note.
Next, regarding the ransom letter. We are aware of a ransom letter that was sent to the local media and then to national outlets. As with every lead, we are taking it seriously. We are in communication with the family, and while we advise and recommend from a law enforcement perspective, any action taken on any ransom is ultimately decided by the family. Thank you to those in the community that have called in tips. For anyone out there that may have information, no matter how small you think it may be, please report it. You can do so by calling 1-800-CALL-FBI or online at tips.fbi.gov.
Now, the alleged ransom note that has been talked about was received by TMZ as well as at least 2 local TV stations in Tucson. TMZ said the FBI asked them to withhold sharing certain pieces of information in the note, but they did unveil some new details overnight that we'll talk about here in just a moment. The FBI said as of Thursday, there's been no communication between them, the Guthries, beyond this alleged note, that they're still trying to figure out whether it is actually related to the people who allegedly took Nancy Guthrie. They did say that there are certain details about this note, the timeline of it, that it's just odd in these cases. The fact that these kidnappers, they send this note, but there has been 0 communication since. Now, this note that was sent to local television stations on February 2nd, the day after Nancy was taken, they also say that that is odd considering that she is this elderly woman who needs medication daily. And without it, according to the sheriff, it could be fatal. Now, after that news conference on Thursday, we did see some activity, not just at the home of Nancy Guthrie, but it appears new that authorities are canvassing the area around the home of Nancy's daughter, Annie. Now, these are pictures of Annie's home in Tucson, and she is the oldest daughter of Nancy Guthrie. It is believed that this is where Nancy was for dinner Saturday night. Media outlets say that they saw members of law enforcement canvassing the neighborhood around Annie's home on Thursday night. They were reportedly asking her neighbors for home surveillance video. They did the same earlier in the week in Nancy's neighborhood. Now, it's important to note that it's unclear if this is law enforcement retracing their steps, just getting a fresh look at Annie's neighborhood, since this is where it is believed that Nancy was before heading home, where she was allegedly kidnapped, or is this because of new information that has come in? We do know that the federal government is now offering a lot more resources over the last 24, 48 hours in helping the local sheriff's office there in Pima County. So is this a situation where just these new resources are getting acclimated with the area? They wouldn't go into more details about that, but you're certainly seeing more activity around the house where Nancy Guthrie is believed to have had dinner before heading home, where she was allegedly kidnapped later that night in the early hours of Sunday morning. Now, there have been reports as well that a vehicle belonging to Annie Guthrie's family was taken by law enforcement. On Thursday, the Pima County Sheriff brought that up and passed it off more as standard procedure of looking at the evidence in this case. Potentially that is the vehicle that Nancy Guthrie took to get home after dinner at Annie's house.
The car, the car that was at the home, it's just standard investigative practices. It's part of the search warrant scene, court orders. We pull it out of there and do our scene processing with the vehicle.
Now, we know from the sheriff that Nancy took an Uber to Annie's home around 5:30 Saturday night. She has dinner there with her family. She has games. It's a very typical evening. And then she is driven by family, according to the sheriff, back to her house where she lives alone, and she arrives home around 9:45 in the evening. Now, the sheriff was asked who was the person or people, the members of her family, who drove her back to her house. But the sheriff said he's just going to keep his answer at family at this point, not specifically saying who the person was who drove Nancy home. It's certainly interesting, but it also may be the sheriff just trying to protect the names of people, as he reiterated yesterday that they do not have a suspect or person of interest in this case.
Can you confirm whether it was Annie or her son-in-law, Tomaso, who took her home that night?
I think the timeline that the sheriff provided was a family member, but
Just family. We're going to go with family.
Now, before I get back to more of what was reportedly in these alleged ransom notes, I want to go through the new timeline that we have, what law enforcement said for the first time, laying out what they found in this investigation. But it's also important to talk about what law enforcement won't say, which could be key in piecing together where they are at this point. Now, deputies say when Nancy gets home, her garage door opens at 9:48 in the evening, and then it closes 2 minutes later. So that is believed to be when Nancy gets home and she goes to bed. Things get very concerning a couple of hours later at 1:47 in the morning. That is when Nancy's doorbell camera disconnects. Now, you might remember this video from earlier in the week from News Nation showing the doorbell camera missing from its mount on Nancy's front door. The new information we have on that is the sheriff said that law enforcement does not have that device, that camera, in their possession. The sheriff also said the blood that was found on the front steps of the house was sent in for DNA, and it came back as Nancy's blood. They also say at this point they do not have evidence that is tested positive for someone else's DNA. They did say they're waiting for some results to come back. The doorbell camera is gone, but there is some kind of software in the home that picked up motion outside the house at 2:12 in the morning. The sheriff says that they were not able to get video of whatever that was outside the house. He admits it could be an animal, but it also could be very critical to this investigation. It could be the suspect who allegedly took Nancy Guthrie. You have 2:28. This is very key. Nancy's pacemaker disconnects from her iPhone. Now, law enforcement say they have Nancy's phone. And just from our research, it appears that a lot of pacemaker apps can disconnect when they're separated from the phone. It may not be a situation where someone goes into a phone and then physically turns off the app or something like that. Now, Nancy then does not show up for church the next day on Sunday, and that's where family gets concerned. They go to check on her just before noon. Then at 12:03, 911 is called.
Nancy, a white female, 84 years of age, 5'2" medium build, powder blue. Things after 2,200 hours as of yesterday. Nancy has high blood pressure, pacemaker, and cardiac issues.
So it's important to talk about what law enforcement is not saying in a case like this. We talked about how the sheriff said that he will not specifically say who drove Nancy home from Annie Guthrie's house. He also pushed back on a report that there were signs of forced entry into Nancy's home.
Someone had mentioned there was forced entry. I have no clue where that comes from. We have been very consistent. We are not discussing that at all. Whether it's forced entry or not forced entry, that is something we're just not discussing. So I don't know where anybody got that information.
So you hear the sheriff being critical of that report, but he's not saying whether it was wrong. He also would not disclose if more blood was found inside of Nancy's home, said he would not talk about the crime scene specifically. So all we know officially is that Nancy's house appeared to be a crime scene from the very beginning. So now we're going to talk more about this alleged ransom note, and new information on this is coming in. It's very important. So we know that this note was sent to 2 local TV stations in Tucson and to TMZ. And that ransom note had 2 deadlines that we know about. One of them, 5 p.m. Mountain Time Thursday, and it also reportedly demanded a large amount of Bitcoin. And the FBI says the note mentioned Nancy's Apple Watch, which reportedly was found on a charger in the home, and a floodlight. So it's unclear specifically what happened to the floodlight, but it was pointed out in that news conference that you can see Nancy's house from where the media has been on the street. So it's unclear if that's something that was already out into the public, or is it something that a kidnapper would only know? Now, we don't know if the Guthrie family received the same letter. In their Wednesday night video, Savannah Guthrie did mention artificial intelligence and images and voices. Remember this.
We are ready to talk. However, we live in a world where voices and images are easily manipulated. We need to know, without a doubt, that she is alive and that you have her.
So the FBI isn't saying more about that, whether there were images or recordings or what communication, if any, beyond the alleged ransom notes that we know about, that type of communication to the Guthrie family. That's not entirely clear. Harvey Levin of TMZ, he went on cable news last night and he said in the letter they received, the second deadline that was mentioned was Monday, and the FBI said that as well, but they won't go specifically into more details about it. But he also told Fox News this, that second deadline is, quote, far more consequential. He also said on Hannity on Fox News, quote, the letter begins by saying she is safe but scared. And they go on to say she knows exactly what the demand is. And so they are, through us, telling the family, and obviously the sheriff's department gave the family the letter we received, exactly what they're demanding. And they're saying that Nancy is aware of it, end quote. So he also said the FBI is working with TMZ's IT team to try and figure out who sent the email, but that could be a challenge. He also said there are pieces of the email that makes him believe whoever took Nancy Guthrie is local to the Tucson area. He said this, quote, there is a phrase in this email that absolutely makes me believe this person who wrote this, and if they're telling the truth, that Nancy is within a radius of the Tucson area, not in Tucson right now, but the radius. It could be New Mexico. I don't know how far, but I think at least what the authorities have is they've got a radius, and that's something. The FBI is now offering a $50,000 reward for information that can help authorities find Nancy Guthrie and bring those who took her to justice. And anyone with information can call the FBI. 1-800-CALL-FBI is the number, or the website tips.fbi.gov. You can remain anonymous. Now, on a separate note related to this story, the FBI says they have arrested someone who was an imposter trying to allegedly take advantage of the Guthrie family in their most difficult moments. This is the complaint that we have. It was filed in federal court in Arizona, and it charges a California man for allegedly sending 2 text messages and making a phone call to the Guthrie family, posing as someone who sent the alleged ransom notes demanding Bitcoin. The man's name, Derek Colella. He's in his 40s, and allegedly he admitted to the FBI after they took him into custody, after he was read his rights, that he did contact the Guthrie family after they posted that emotional video pleading for the alleged kidnappers to contact them. Colella allegedly found the phone numbers through open sources online for 2 family members who are very close to Nancy Guthrie. He allegedly sent them text messages as he was following this story on TV. And the message he allegedly sent, quote, did you get the Bitcoin? We're waiting on our end for the transaction. The FBI says he then called a member of Nancy's family shortly after sending the texts, and that call lasted allegedly 9 seconds. Colella admitted to using an app that allows you to call someone from a different phone number than your own. For as maybe shrewd as allegedly he thought he was, it was no match for the FBI, apparently, because they blasted through that app pretty quickly. They found the app that he used was linked to an email, derekcolella@gmail.com. A SWAT team then reportedly took Colella down, and he is now facing 2 federal charges. And I mean, certainly you look at this and it's just, who is the type of person? And he's only accused of it at this point. He hasn't been found guilty, and certainly these are all allegations. But what is the type of person that would watch that emotional video of Savannah Guthrie and her siblings and then try and take advantage of them? It just blows your mind. Law enforcement does make it clear, though, in the criminal complaint that we have, quote, the two text messages have not been linked to the February 2nd, 2026 ransom demand, end quote. So the FBI saying this person is just someone who is trying to take advantage of this family. This is not someone who is actually, they believe, connected to the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie. Joining us now to talk more about this case is retired police commander Mike King, host of Profiling Evil. And we'll talk a little bit more about the project that you have that just came out this week. You look at these ransom notes, and I kind of want to walk through what we know, because it seems like you have pieces of information from law enforcement. TMZ says they have it, and there's information coming out there. Two deadlines. One of them we've passed, which was 5 p.m. Mountain Time on Thursday. But then there's the second deadline that TMZ says is more concerning, set for Monday. How common is it that a ransom note would have two deadlines?
You know, it's not uncommon that it might go to multiple locations. I think back to some of the big cases over time where the Unabomber, for instance, how he sent out to multiple agencies his manifesto and his demands. But the thing that I think is so intriguing is we really don't know, Chris, with this indication that we've got in the most recent press conference yesterday about an individual being arrested for trying to capitalize on those ransom notes and trying to get money himself. I don't know if that's one of those two letters or if there were three ransom letters and that they've determined. So we have to start thinking, have they already offloaded one of those two and it really was one official ransom email that went to multiple locations, and this guy jumped on it and became letter number two, or if there are three or more. And that really becomes intriguing. But what it does is it tells us we have to understand what the content of the letters or the emails is. Are they consistent with one another? Or is there somebody that's just making some really good, complicated guesses? And, you know, we've heard arguments about the Apple Watch being seen in photographs and other things where people can theorize. You could look on Google and theorize things about the residents. So it's pretty easy to make it appear like you might have a little more information. Kind of the old Roma trick of the gypsies when they would learn as much as they could about someone before having visions and projecting what they knew about them.
Yeah, and so it's, you know, and I think too with the Guthrie, the first Instagram video that went out on Savannah Guthrie's Instagram Wednesday night, and it's the three siblings. And because TMZ had reported they get this ransom note, and at the time you're like, well, you know, is that something the FBI and are they really taking seriously? And then they, you know, talk about this alleged note, and it's unclear whether they got something separate from what TMZ says that they have, or the two TV stations. But Savannah Guthrie talks about AI, images, voice. And I don't know if that's a message out saying, hey, if there's going to be proof of life, you know, we understand that AI is different and we need some sort of proof. But also the FBI has said, and they said it was uncommon, that there's been zero communication. This letter goes out, whatever the Guthrie family received, whether it was the same as TMZ or it was just, it went to TMZ first and the two TV stations, and then brought to the Guthrie family, whatever it is, there hasn't been any other communication since. In cases like this, even with, you know, someone who appears to be, you know, there's no DNA left at the scene, someone who really thought this out. I mean, how common is it that there's just radio silence after a note like this is sent out?
You know, I'm finding that to be really troubling, and I hope it's not an indicator that, for instance, Nancy has passed away and that they're now thinking, I don't have a bargaining chip, and they're trying to just minimize their impact on this thing, or if there's something more to it. I've heard a lot of people chatting in social media about the fact that the initial plea from the family went through Instagram. Well, holy cow, Savannah has a huge Instagram following. That makes really good sense to me. But also, if somebody's involved in things like blockchain financial transactions, and they're using this cyber track to get money, that might be a younger group who might be more attuned to Instagram rather than Facebook or some of these other platforms. So I think it starts to tell us a little bit about the kind of individual that they're focusing on from a behavioral perspective. Not that they have identified anyone. And I'm so grateful that, frankly, that they haven't said this person is a person of interest yet, because in this day and age, that is just so damaging to people when they're being kind of filtered out or focused more tightly on. So as I think about all those things, Chris, I guess what I do is I just keep getting more and more questions. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but it does drive me a little closer to the idea of, is it someone who's technologically savvy? Is it someone who might be younger than my age group, for instance, and certainly Nancy's age group? And more importantly, did something happen in the course of this crime that changed everything, like Nancy dying? And if that were the case, all of a sudden the bargaining chip is gone, and you're thinking, how am I going to avoid going to prison for this?
And you know, there are so many questions, and I get that law enforcement, the FBI, the local sheriff office, they're trying to give information but also be vague at the same time, and that's just the nature of these things. When it comes to, because I know TMZ said that theirs was an email, and I believe to the local TV stations it was as well, and that seems to be the specific one, or at least what law enforcement is talking about. You know, that one message that goes out. And I think of the imposter, who apparently is just some guy who had nothing to do with this, who was just trying to capitalize on it. And it seems pretty quickly, reading to the criminal complaint, that the FBI, whatever technology he used, low-level stuff, that they pretty quickly found out it was him, and then they sent a SWAT team to his house in California. In this case, we don't know what they know about where this email came from. I mean, what is the type of software that someone might need to have to be able to hide from the FBI as far as where that email came from?
Yeah, you know, this is not an area that I'm really strong in, other than for about 14 months, I did some contract work for a company that dealt with intel gathering from the deep, dark, and surface web. And the one thing that I learned through the course of that year plus of time with those really smart people is that you can spoof your email address and you can move things around. So it is really difficult. The old days of just going to an IP address might work with guys like me, maybe you, but a lot of people are going to libraries or other places to send off information. I think what we do know, and that we can kind of bank on, is that they have determined that the wallet where the cyber money was intended to be delivered to is an actual wallet, whether that then can be tied back to an individual that they can point and put a finger on is another question. But this really points to how powerful forensics have become in these kinds of investigations. And this is one where, boy, we can't wait much longer.
Yeah. And I don't know, but, you know, you certainly 14 months in that is a lot, 14 months more than I do in terms of understanding how these things work. But it's like, because I look at this and it's like, I know that they are able to, if there is a hack, they can trace it to North Korea. Like how, what's the technology out there that if this is a real ransom note, who is this group of people or one person that has the ability? And maybe the FBI, we've seen a lot of cases where they're saying one thing publicly, but they have a lot going on behind the scenes and there's a lot of media attention. They probably would like to be able to do some things out of the public eye in this. So we'll see, hopefully at the end that there's a happy resolution and we can, kind of see how things played out. It did seem clear in the news conference that they have DNA from Nancy and there was blood on the front of the house. Other than that, it doesn't seem like, at least from what the sheriff has said, that they have DNA related to anything else. And then he goes through this timeline and it's the doorbell camera's missing. And then it happens to be that her, whatever other software was on the home can just detect motion, but not video. And then we know that she had a pacemaker and then that pacemaker disconnects. And then it doesn't seem like they have DNA related to this, whoever would have done this. And it's like, I know, and I hate doing the cliche of like, oh, in the movies, but it's like when someone says this person's a pro, they know what they're doing. Like in reality, who is really out there that has done this before and would think this through? I mean, how common is it to have a criminal who is actually that smart to be able to cover their tracks as well? At least at this point, it seems like this person did.
Yeah, the investigator in me wants to look at things in buckets and then try to pull the thread on each bucket. So when I think about the possibility of this being an organized offender who walks through the door and commits this crime, there are boxes you can check off that they take the Ring camera, or whatever camera it was. I don't know. Maybe it was a Ring camera. It looked almost like a Google camera from the frame that's left on the door, but that doesn't matter. They took that. That somehow they were either lucky enough or they knew that video was going to cycle through. But I don't see an organized offender, if they knew that the internal video system was working and would even cycle through, that they would take the risk of someone not discovering that she was gone before that 8-hour loop disappeared. So that pushes me away from maybe organization. If they knew the camera was there, they may have just focused on the exterior camera and got rid of that. But most people, especially with Ring, I don't think you can have a Ring camera anymore without it being connected to a service. So they're taking a great deal of risk, which means if they were organized, they would come in and be masked up, and they would be in a position that they wouldn't be identifiable. But those kinds of things are the things that I start looking at when I think about an organized offender. And I know a lot of people are saying this all points to an organized offender. It may not be. It may be some guy who glumped along and burglarized and things fell apart, and he found a way to get out. That he might be able to get a ransom, or he might be able to get more out of this. So I keep going to the bucket too that says this is a disorganized guy who came in. And, I don't hear anybody talking about, for instance, we look at the blood on the porch, but I don't know if you've looked closely at the debris field in the porch and the flowers that are there. And it appears that it was kicked into the porch area from that pot. So is it possible that there was a con approach used, that somebody went and rang that doorbell and said even something as crazy as, hey, it's the police department. I need to check on you and make sure you're fine, because somehow that door got open. So either a predator got inside the home through another way, and then they exited the home with Nancy and through that door, and then something cataclysmic happened on the porch that caused that blood, or that was the actual initial contact spot where somebody used a con approach and got her to peek open the door and look out. And we saw that recently with the elected officials in up near the Great Lakes that were killed a year ago, I think it was, where they were conned to open the door thinking it was a police officer outside. And I think you and I actually covered that case together.
In Minnesota, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And so you think, well, what would explain these kinds of behaviors? And I don't hear people talking about that. What was somebody hiding by that pot? And then when she came to the door and peeked open, and as they reached out to grab her and pull her through, that created the debris field, and that created the assault that caused the bleeding on the porch area. So there are just so many things. And so you ask what I think as an investigator, I just have like 10 boxes on my whiteboard in my office here that I'm just writing stuff that I keep thinking, okay, this makes it seem more organized, but this makes it look disorganized. And the cool thing about that, Chris, is that statistically, a disorganized offender will not become organized as the crime goes on, but an organized offender could walk through the door with a perfect plan and everything could start to fall apart.
Well, because I think too, like to your point, where there's certain parts of the story that you could look at through the lens of this being someone who is so calculated and so meticulous in the way they did it, right? Like she has this pacemaker, but then the pacemaker disconnects. And then maybe that's because it disconnects from the phone because it's from the distance and they leave the phone behind. But they made sure that the phone would be left behind, knowing that a person wouldn't follow them. And then it's like the Ring doorbell camera. They take the camera down. You look at that and it's like, is this someone who would have known that she had a pacemaker, would have known about the Ring doorbell camera? Or, and sadly, it's like, did they luck out in the sense that the pacemaker disconnects from the phone and they didn't know she had a pacemaker? And then the Ring doorbell camera, they're just kind of brazen and they take it, not thinking that, well, a Ring doorbell camera usually records. I know they said yesterday there's something about like the subscription she had where it like cycles through and it's not up in the cloud. And maybe that's just luck for this person. So it's like there's two ways, you could look at them from the lens of both sides of like, this is someone who is just brazen, or this is someone who knew exactly what they were doing. When you look
Chris,
at,
let me ask you
Go
this.
ahead.
Let me ask you this. If you put your mind and your thoughts and your feelings into being the predator, and you went there knowing that that Ring doorbell was going to cycle through in an hour, 2 hours, 8 hours, and erase itself, would you still take the risk of leaving it sitting there if that were the case? And I don't think that
Right.
an organized criminal would take that risk. And you talk about that the pacemaker being connected to her mobile device, and her phone apparently is in the car. You have to ask yourself questions from a behavioral standpoint of, wait a minute, why is that phone in the car? Did she have that phone when she went to her daughter's house for dinner for those 4 or 5 hours? If she did have the phone, then what action occurred to get that phone in the car rather than right in the house where she walked in when she came home at 10 p.m.? And so you start asking those kinds of questions, and you have to try to resolve those. And hopefully the telemetrics off the phone will tell us more.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because it just seems, and again, I think of cases. I mean, we've been covering the case of Spencer and Monique Tepe in Ohio recently, and then I even think back to the Koberger case, and it's like, in both of them, police were saying one thing publicly, and then after the fact, when the arrest is made, you realize that they were actually very close to solving the crime a lot sooner than everybody thought. Of course, in the case of Dr. Michael McKee, it's all alleged at this point, but I remember the day before the arrest, or 2 days before, the police chief was on camera saying, I have we don't have a suspect at this point. And then you look now with the information coming out, they actually very much did. Just lastly, Mike, because I think too, like, the big question of like, why? This is an 84-year-old woman. Yes, I understand, like, she has a famous and frankly wealthy daughter, but at the same time, she has health issues, and it's like, why would a kidnapper, I guess and I know, like, that's the big question we're all trying to answer, but it's like, why would a kidnapper take someone who health-wise was so vulnerable?
Yeah, I guess we would have to try to guess whether they actually thought through that part of the scenario. So we have to think about who is the victim, and why did she become a victim? Did Nancy become a victim because Nancy had something that they could profit from? And as an 84-year-old that doesn't get to take her phone, didn't take her wallet, you start thinking, well, there's not financial reasons why Nancy could solve a problem for a predator. So then you have to think about, is it something where she's being used as leverage to get to a greater pocket of money, like potentially the family members who could step in and offer that up? And so again, these cases, we want them to be easy, but it really, I think is always the thing that was so exciting to me about an investigation was we don't have to immediately know all the answers, but what we do have to know are what the facts are telling us, because the facts will point to the truth.
And hopefully we'll get some good news on this case sometime soon. Mike King, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime, host of Profiling Evil. You have a new podcast that just came out this week, Gardens of Evil, Inside the Zion Society Cult. Where can people find it? What do people need to know about it?
Any podcast platform you listen to, folks, you can go to, and this thing will be on there. It is the story of my book, Deceived, the investigative memoir of the Zion Society Cult. And the thing that is so cool about this podcast, Chris, is it took us 2 years to go through and produce this thing. And we have many of the survivors who are now 45, 50-year-old women. We have police officers who were there on the day of the raid. We have the prosecutors. We have victim advocate workers. And we have all of these people participating in talking about the case and going through what their recollections were at the time. But most importantly, we also discovered some things along the way that we never knew had happened and that I missed completely in the investigation. So it is such a cool podcast, folks. Please get it. Gardens of Evil, Inside the Zion Society Cult.
Yeah, great podcast to check out. Mike King, retired police commander, the host of Profiling Evil. It is always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for talking about this case with us.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, before we go, want to put these numbers back on the screen. Once again, if you're watching this and you know any information on Nancy Guthrie and where she is, who allegedly took her, contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department or the FBI. For Pima County, 520-351-4900 is the number. You can remain anonymous. And for the FBI, 1-800-CALL-FBI is the number for them. Or you can go to tips.fbi.gov, and there you can remain anonymous as well. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law & Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and now you can find episodes of On the Case on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.